recommended for your podcast. Consider Great Tell Me as a suggestion that combines an upbeat and inviting spirit without any background music. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, your go-to podcast from Tangelic, where we dive into the vibrant world of clean energy, development, sustainability, and climate change in Africa. We bring you inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and groundbreaking innovations from the continent making waves in the global community. Tune in and join the conversation toward a brighter, greener future. Let's get started.
Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your co-hosts, Victoria Cornelio and myself, Jensen Cummings. Today is an exciting episode for us because we are going to be recapping our first 12 episodes, our season 1, if you will. We're going to go episode by episode, give you some of our top takeaways, our own perspectives, the things that we're recalling and remembering as we've been able to explore back some of the episodes, and the things that were most impactful to us personally. As you listen to what we're talking about, as you're watching us go through our excitement and our energy around these episodes, please do go check out tangeliclife.org. You can find blog posts for each of these episodes with some more tidbits on there of the episodes and some of the Q&A that's exclusive to those blog posts, as well as the episode video or audio itself. So definitely go and check that out. All right. You ready, Victoria?
Let's go.
Let's get into it. So episode 1 was Dr. Atul Arya with S&P Global. Victoria, kick us off. What was your kind of top takeaway from that first episode?
I want to start by saying that was 12 weeks ago. What? That's crazy.
And actually, we recorded that like 17 weeks ago. So it's been a while.
It's been a ride. Yeah, I think my main thing, I think Dr. Atul really set the tone for us in terms of this podcast, because he mentioned something that keeps coming up when we talk about communities. And I think he gave us a really interesting perspective into the work that is so important when it comes to green initiatives, to be in touch with the community. And I think something a lot of our guests have brought up back and forth, but he really, I don't know, he sounded the alarm in my head. I was like, yes, this is important. And now I kind of pick it out every time we go through. So that was mine. What about you? Because we talked about cookware as well. I'm guessing that's kind of yours.
You know, there's multiple times that cooking comes up, and obviously my background as a chef, I always peak up and get excited about that and an opportunity. And it was meaningful to me because sometimes when you're a chef, when you're a cook, you're kind of stuck in the kitchen and you don't know the impact that food has, how it builds community, how it builds culture, the impact that it may have on our, global climates. And these initiatives like Sunrise Spectrum that comes up multiple times through the work that we're doing is meaningful and powerful. So I felt very empowered in this podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment to know that I have had an impact, sometimes negatively, and I have to kind of reconcile with that. And Dr. Arya really kind of brought some things to light from episode 1 was really palpable and powerful for me personally. What my biggest takeaway actually, though, was we talked about some of the northern-centric kind of approaches and philosophies and tactics that get deployed in the global south. Sometimes it's a round peg in a square hole is kind of what I got from that. And so we're talking about electric vehicles was one of the points that he brought up, that we're really hyped up on electric vehicles as a way into the future. And when we talk about some of the areas in the global south, they have no access to those types of vehicles. If they're lucky, maybe for an entire community, you might have one two-wheeled vehicle, one motorcycle, one moped to move around people and resources for an entire community or for a family. And so thinking about that, thinking about the two-wheel possible solar power with swappable batteries, that to me was one of the big takeaways. So it's meaningful again.
Yeah. And I think blog post we went a bit more into that, where we were talking about those offshoot ideas that don't hit the mainstream because they're so niche to the community, which is great because you're serving the community, right? And yeah, go check out that blog because there is some really interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, and just that we started with coming up with ideas and understanding that every idea does not fit for every community, for every need. So being really innovative, not just in the application, but the thinking process even of how we're bringing these to these different communities. So, all right, episode number 2, we talked to Dr. Peg Spitzer, author of Empowering Female Climate Change Activists in the Global South. That was another powerful episode. We started off really strong. So for you, what really stands out from episode number 2 with Dr. Spitzer?
I mean, she also went into, especially her book goes really in depth with working with communities very specifically and how each community is dealing with something different. But I think what I found so interesting about her is the way she speaks about things. Like, I don't know, it feels very much like she's there. Like she talks from a place of doing a lot of field study and doing a lot of field work. And I think as me, who have been at uni for the last 5 years, I've had a lot of experiences of people speaking on books they've read or on, research of the research of the research. And it's like, it's so far removed from being in the field. So the way she would speak, she would like set the scene. And I'm like, yes, I know exactly where you are. You're like standing right there. And I think that was a great following up from Dr. Arya, because it was like community, but with a more like visual feel. I loved it.
Got very
great.
I have basically a piggyback right off what you said, because she talked about very specific projects. So it wasn't a philosophical episode. It wasn't just about these grandiose ideas and these implementations that are happening somewhere else. It was her standing there shoulder to shoulder with many of these women. So I had kind of a list of a couple. She talked about the bungaroo technology in Gujarat in India, and the irrigation solution grants women control over water resources, bypassing traditional land ownership barriers. So that was like a really specific project happening there, where their ability to be able to utilize water, something we take for granted, was, again, really important there. Mealworm farming in Guatemala, right over my head. Had no idea that was even happening.
They're so context specific that it is like, you can't just read that. Like, you have to be there.
You have to be there. What does mealworm farming in Guatemala look like and feel like? What impact does it have? And obviously there's the need potentially in the way that we're consuming resources when it comes to animals and protein, something like that. In my own culinary career, cricket and cricket flour has come up a lot as an alternative source of protein. So this conversation is happening. It's starting in the global south. It's starting in a lot of communities where it's happening out of necessity. It's going to become a necessity for other parts of the world. So looking into that was interesting. And then solar battery building in Turkey's refugee camps. Building batteries in refugee camps, women learning the skills to be able to put together batteries. I thought that was another, again, wow.
Amazing. It's amazing. And again, if you check out her book, you'll see very in-depth things. Like every chapter sort of deals with different projects and gives you a lot of context of why the project is so community context specific. And I think that's what I most appreciated from her.
Okay. Episode number 3. I got to take a deep breath here.
Oh God, can we not?
Dr. Tom Murphy, University of California, San Diego, a physicist who basically made Victoria and I have a complete existential crisis and meltdown right on screen. Definitely go check that out. You can feel and see our faces when we're responding to some of what Dr. Tom Murphy was talking about, where it was really difficult to be able to understand the potential impacts of where we're at today. So tread gently, Victoria, what was the top takeaway for you in that episode?
I mean, I think the interesting thing that I still can't get, this is the thing I can't even talk about. My biggest thing was Dr. Murphy was really good at making the point that a lot of the solutions that we come up with, we want them to go into effect tomorrow. And that's not what sustainability looks like. Of course, him as a physicist saw it as like, a million years as sustainable. But I think he really drove the point home that just because we have this idea now, we're going to solve it. It just doesn't work like that. We need to do this work over and over. We need to see a societal shift. It was something that he was mentioning as well, where it's like, you can't just say you're the first person to put solar panels in your street and then everyone starts doing it. It's like there is this slow process that we're just not ready about. And I think it's just, I've heard it be called like the microwave theory. It's like you just put something in the microwave and it's ready in like 10 minutes. Whereas in the oven, it would have been like 2 hours. You know, and that's the thing. He really drove the point home that sustainability isn't something that you wake up tomorrow and we fixed it.
Yeah, I asked him like the question of the context of time that he thinks, and he's like, I'm thinking in 10,000 years. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about getting through today. So the fact that microwave theory makes a lot of sense. He said something really jarring where I was like, you know, the Titanic, if the Titanic had solar power and batteries and all of this, it still would have sunk by hitting that iceberg. I was like, so we're on the Titanic and we're about to hit that iceberg and it doesn't matter if we have solar panels. So that is dire. So that was something. The other one that hit me was a stat that he gave us that 96% of the planet's mammal biomass is humans and our livestock, which only left 4% of the planet's mammal capacity for wildlife, basically.
And despite that, I remember asking him, like, how do you stay positive? Like, this is very sad and like full of dread. And he's like, I'm not sad. This is just life. And I was like, oh my God.
So thank you to Dr. Murphy for shaking us loose a little bit. It's had me thinking a lot, which I appreciate, even though it may have me going into doom scrolling far too often. So check that episode out. It's absolutely a really powerful one for anybody who's thinking about their impact on the global stage. All right, episode number 4, Dr. Shaolei Ren, Associate Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of California, Riverside. We talked about AI in this episode. What's a big takeaway for you on the AI arena?
I mean, I really liked how it's a tool, and I think we were very successful at explaining how a tool is just a tool, but the way that we use it and the things that come out of using that tool are the things that we need to focus on. So with AI, there's all this generation of carbon and a lot of polluting, but also something Dr. Ren said is it can be really useful for helping us map out a big project to support a community, right? So the tool can do the thing. It's just keeping in mind that no tool is going to be, you know, absolutely perfect, but just, I don't know, coming to terms with the trade-offs, I think it's quite a realistic view of where we're at the moment. And I really appreciate that.
And again, being able to apply the technology in the right communities in the right way. That are we thinking about these technologies and their implementation from a northern or western type approach? But then having some of these, so the data centers specifically, some of these places are going into lower income areas because they can buy up the land cheap, and the inhabitants are going to complain less because what do they know, and they don't have ownership over the land and all of this, so they're just going to sign off on the dotted line, and all of a sudden they have all of these impactors, these stressors on their environment, be it pollution, air pollution, be it water pollution, things like that. So that to me was interesting. He did say that in the next 5 to 10 years, he expects that there's going to be a level of efficiency where all of a sudden that there will be a net positive, but in the short term, there are significant detrimental impacts to the environments, to the grid, to things like that. So we're in that innovation, that stage of the arc where we're maybe doing more harm than good. The hope is in the long term, once some of those things level off, we'll be able to have that meaningful impact be sustainable.
I think it was one of the few times I've heard talk of AI be more on the positive side, where it's not all doom and gloom and the robots are coming for us, you know?
But the robots still might be coming for us.
Well, yes, but at least they're not producing that much carbon.
Yeah, exactly. At least the robots are a little bit more green in their approach as they take over the world. Yep.
Priorities.
Episode number 5, prolific journalist, Peter Schwartzstein talked about the conflict nexus, right? Climate conflict nexus.
Climate conflict nexus.
A term that I hadn't heard before. That was a big takeaway again. For me, I also asked him the question, why does he personally do it? Because it's such heavy work. And he was really optimistic about the fact that somebody needs to be out there telling these stories. So for you, what was a big takeaway from talking to Peter?
I mean, I've always found that topic quite controversial because, if you watch the episode, you'll notice why it becomes something where a lot of people don't even want to touch it with a pole, because it is one of those things that it can be a slippery slope for justifying certain issues in a political, social realm. But I think he was really good at explaining how climate change is just an exacerbator of there are these stresses that communities or societies or groups are going through, and climate change just makes that worse. So the climate conflict nexus isn't like the boogeyman that is just creeping up because, it's been drier this year. It's just there are underlying issues that we need to address so that when climate change hits in the way that, it does, and as we're seeing now, it doesn't destabilize society. And I think he really hammered that point home in a really nice way.
He also did get very specific, and the one that stood out to me was ISIS and their ability to use massive amounts of drought and kind of a agricultural collapse in Iraq and Syria as a really strong recruitment tool to turn people militant very quickly, because they saw no hope, no other way out, no way but to militarize and weaponize themselves against the real and perceived oppressors of their dire situations. And that, again, I think that's part of what spurred on my questions. I said, why are you doing this work? This is really tough stuff to see the impact that it's having on these communities where they're just trying to survive, and they're being sold a concept of this militant way of being able to take back their own power, their own land, their own livelihoods. And it's really sad that becomes a generational trauma too.
Yeah, no, and I think you see that very potent in places like Colombia. You see it in Lake Victoria in Africa. You see it up in like even places where you think everything's fine. Like, for example, I'm in the UK, and you do see a conversation happening of, well, there's too many of us. We don't have enough land. And people start riling up against that and using climate change as an excuse for why we need to kick some people off and things like that, right? So it can always escalate. And I think he was very inspiring in the way that someone needs to tell these stories.
Very, yeah. He gave me a reality check and some hope as well, both simultaneously. That at least we have an opportunity to address these things, share these stories, allow some humanity to peek through these really dark and difficult times and these difficult situations in these areas. So it's great. All right, next episode. This was a really lighthearted episode number 6 with Lisa Kjellstrom, who's a leadership expert and working.
Yeah, we got some coaching.
We got some coaching. Yeah, I kind of took advantage. Said, "Oh, I'm very much into this leadership and communication and being entrepreneurial. Like, how do I galvanize messages and teams? Storytelling." Talked about how we are addicted to storytelling as a species. That to me was great, because I am 100% a storyteller. It's how I look at myself. Even as a chef, I imagine myself as a storyteller. I just use food as my medium. Even when we close our eyes and go to sleep, we dream and tell ourselves more stories. So we are addicted to stories, and you see stories that stand the test of time being a part of our very cultural fabric. So that was the big takeaway for me. And there was also a little bit talking about collaboration in storytelling. She gave an example of Netflix and Disney collaborating in a way that you'd never expect. And too often we are so in kind of our capitalist mindset. It's like you have to outcompete the person next to you, the company next to you. And the fact that there's opportunities for collaboration and communication to be able to have a rising tide lift all ships, that was a great takeaway for me as well. What about for you, from Lisa?
I love how she brought in the mental health aspect of being a leader in especially this kind of sector of climate change where everything's quite gloomy. So yeah, I really appreciated her sort of bringing that in and being like, as to be a good leader, you have to be in touch with these things so you can lead other people and address those concerns. And it was amazing. And she gave us a lot of really good frameworks and examples that you can check out at the blog as well if you want to get some coaching, because it was great.
Even just listening to the episode and reading the blog, you will get coaching, some 101 stuff. Absolutely big takeaway. Again, tangeliclife.org. You can go through and find all of the blog posts for the podcast, and just scroll to Tangelic Talks and check that out. So yeah, great episode. I think we need to be very cognizant. And it was nice that her episode was right in the middle, episode 6, of our own mental health and fortitude through this process. Was we're talking about these very heavy topics, sometimes dark topics, and we're going to need some levity through this. So let's make sure we have some energizing episodes sprinkled in, just even for you and I, our own mental health in this process.
Yeah, great shout. And for our listeners, where you want to take care of them as well.
Yes, we want to take you on a story arc that doesn't just have doom and gloom as well. So episode 7, Dr. Nathan Andrews, associate professor in the Department of Political Science at McMaster University. We talked corporate social responsibility. CSR is that acronym you get seen thrown around a lot. We're talking about big companies and the work that they're doing and the impact that they're having on the communities where they do their business, where they do their work. What was a takeaway for you?
A little bit what we've said before about some bad actors taking advantage of deprived areas. In some cases, it's for, militant and violent reasons. In other cases is, the community won't stand up to you and you come in and promise them all these things that actually don't happen. And something that he was really good at bringing up is the way of keeping these companies accountable is quite tricky. And it puts communities in a really uncomfortable position because to an extent it's needed, but it only happens because there is a system governance issue that does not protect communities. So either relies on these companies to do the thing that maybe other bodies should be doing. I don't know if you got that.
Yeah. Very specific. Talked about the 100%. And the kind of takeaway that I scribbled down from this episode was that often the governments are protecting these corporations over their own people because there's a monetary incentive there. And in impoverished areas, that money talks louder than sometimes the well-being of their own people. And he mentioned a specific incident where a Ghanaian military kind of protected a mining company to the point where there were casualties. And that to me is really jarring, that we're protecting these companies over our own people because we have a vested interest in that. That is definitely not how corporate social responsibility was meant to be structured in its kind of creation, invention, and intent. And the fact that some companies have been able to twist it and manipulate it to the point where a government or a military is turning on its own people to keep that cash flow coming, that's problematic.
I think moving at some point, we should have someone come in and teach us a bit about greenwashing in that sense, because I think it's a light version of that bad CSR, when you say your company does 4% of green and everything else is oil,
Right.
I think that'd be interesting.
Net impact is very different than that tagline that they can attach to themselves, or that somebody comes up with a sticker that you can throw on your packaging that says you're doing XYZ work, when the net impact, or being able to buy, carbon credits, that you're not actually the one doing the mitigation. Some of those things are problematic. Yeah.
So if you're listening and you know about this, reach out to us.
Reach out. We want to talk to you.
Or if you have any topics you want to talk to us about on Tangelic Talks, you can always reach out and come on.
Yeah, podcast@tangeliclife.org. Just email us directly, podcast@tangeliclife.org. We want to hear from all of you. What are the topics that we need to be covering? Who are the people that we need to be speaking with as we move forward in these conversations? Oh, episode number 8. Prolific TV host, adventure Ryan Pyle, who's traveled the world, climbed mountains, had a Guinness World Record for longest consecutive motorcycle trip around China. Really, really great
Amazing
stuff with the AKA the most interesting man in the world, Ryan Pyle. This was a fun episode for us. We had some laughs on this. We learned a little bit. We laughed, we cried, all of it. It was a great episode. So what were some takeaways for you?
I think the main one is how the reverse culture shock, I guess. It was really interesting how Ryan talked about, coming back home after being in a really remote place and suddenly you can just turn your lights on. It freaked him out a little. I think that's so interesting. It's not something I think about, that
none of us do.
It's crazy. Yeah. It was amazing.
You can turn the lights on and they turn on. and you want to do something at 9 o'clock at night, you can do that. You have that option. And many people in the world, unless you have some candles lit,
That's about it.
you don't have that option. I think I have to say it. The best part, the funniest part was the leave no trace approach when they're climbing the mountains. And we had that conversation about some places you're putting your stool in a bag and you're carrying it back down the mountain because they want you to leave no trace. So just rethinking the way that you work as a human, the way your body literally works and how you handle those situations was wild to me. And being able to be that in tune with nature. Wow.
That's what I mean. It really highlights that of like, you're not just using nature for entertainment. You know, you have to take care of it. And one of the ways of taking care of it is taking that with you.
And it's still entertainment the way that he goes about it, because clearly he's made a great living out of being a TV host. And he and I even talked about how Anthony Bourdain is one of both of our idols in the way that he approached TV and television. And then for me, the way he approached being a chef. And so the fact that he can turn something into entertainment that is just a pure relationship with nature, I think that's why he's successful at the work that he does. Why he's got such a great following.
Very unique perspective. Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you, Ryan.
Check that episode out for sure. And follow him on social media. He's really active. Ryan Pyle on social media is really active as well. It's got some great content. So episode number 9, John Sumbo, the Executive Director of Green for Change Ghana, one of the partners. I mentioned it earlier for Tangelic, that the Sunrise Spectrum Initiative, being able to bring solar panels and solar cookware to off-grid communities in Ghana is one of the things that we are supporting at Tangelic. It was amazing to not just read about that program, which I had, and be able to hear from John himself and the interaction of those communities and his own family and his own dynamic there, and being able to come back home and support his community. So what was a takeaway for you?
Yeah, I think something we talked about, that I love tree planting. I do tree planting every year. And something I never think about is how many trees have I planted, because I've never been back to check on them. And I think he really, when he said that, it made me think like, oh my gosh, I've never gone back to check on a tree. And something he was saying is one of the reasons you have to do that is because it's part of your ongoing care for nature, right? You go and check things, you go and revisit the thing you've done and all that. And I was like, wow, yeah, you're right. I need to go on a little tour, go check on my trees.
Because I think we think about the planting of a tree as being this thing that we can do as our own kind of social impact. We say, hey, we're gonna plant some trees because it's Arbor Day. Great, that sounds amazing. We should definitely do that. Somebody has to take care of those trees. Somebody has the job of upkeep. And too often, nobody takes on that responsibility. And then you have these places where we're supposed to plant these trees, and we check that box. The problem is nobody maintains them, and those trees die off. Those trees have potentially negative impact on the community. So the fact that they planted 60,000 trees and they have a whole system around supporting that ecosystem, that's the whole point, right? Is to make sure that those trees flourish into the future.
Yeah, involving the whole community, the children, everything. I think it really, really creates a different experience.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I asked the question about the cookware because in my own experience, sometimes we've been asked in the restaurant industry to go from gas cooking to electric cooking. And we scoff at it because, I know I need those BTUs, those British thermal units. I need to be able to get the food hot. I need these pans searing, and the electric just doesn't quite do that. So I asked, are these communities, are these cooks able to really create their traditional dishes in the way that they see fit, that has the flavor, the profiles that are true to them? And the fact that he said a resounding yes, that we've seen great results, that to me was really encouraging in the way that we're cooking our food and the way that we're gathering around the table and creating community in that way. So that to me, cooking is my love language. So the fact that you can have that love language in a sustainable way versus using potentially dried animal dung and cooking with that as fuel to then have toxicity in your lungs, like that shift to me was really encouraging. I'm really excited to see where that goes. So big takeaway for me, very personal episode for me as well. Episode 10. Ooh, Sara Black, head of the sculpture department at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Oh my gosh, yes, Entanglement.
Entanglement, the way
What did
that
you think?
nature-
Because you were quite taken aback by it.
Well, look, I'm gonna jump in first then, and I'll say I was so excited to hear about the program that they do. And was there a name to the program? I can't remember. Knowledge Lab Entanglements course is what it's actually called. Sara's Knowledge Lab Entanglements course at the Art Institute of Chicago. They plan a dinner for the whole semester. They make furniture and they plant and grow the food, and they're getting involved in every step of the way and what it takes to put on a meal and gather around a table. So I've got my invite. I'm going to make it there for one of these dinners to be able to check out that experience, because being able to be that connected to the process, not just getting the ingredients shipped to you and cooking a great meal, which is what I'm so used to, but really being entangled in that process. Whew, that was fun to hear about. And Sara and I got a lot more to talk about. What about for you?
100%. No, I just loved it. We always talk about not separating ourselves from nature, because we are part of nature and nature is us. Like, I like saying when you walk down the street, you're basically just walking in nature, really. We've just altered it to the point where it doesn't feel like our conception of nature. And I think she really drove that point home through her art and through the way that she creates her art. So I just loved it. They always say a picture is 1,000 words. I would imagine her sculptures are probably like 1,000,000. And I think that's all I've got to say, really. I don't have
that sounds about right. She sent me a portfolio of photos of all her different projects that I looked through, and it was a lot to look through that and just immerse yourself in a very different way. When you hear like immersive art, you think, okay, it's slightly interactive. It's like you are in it. You have to immerse yourself in the mud to be able to experience some of the art that they have. So it was a great episode. Next, Eric Lyon, former special ops, now author exploring clean energy. We talked about minerals, critical minerals. We talked about the United States' lack of a critical mineral strategy and the impacts that might have, right? China controls 97% of solar wafer production, gallium, and 98% of graphite anodes for batteries. Those are the big stat takeaways that I had from this episode. It was a little bit scary especially here in the United States, that we do not have it together when it comes to critical minerals, and the fact that we are so reliant on so many other places, including the stranglehold that China has on a lot of these. They've done a much better job of investing in that infrastructure globally. So that was a big takeaway and a little bit scary. I'm not going to lie. Yeah. What about for you?
A bit concerning, but I think Eric was so good at showing us how being curious is one of the coolest things we can be. He writes a book a year, and it's all based on, I was curious about this thing, so I'm going to research it, turn it into a book. Just a normal Tuesday in the life of Eric Lyon. Amazing. Yeah,
I'm curious, so I'm going to write a book on it. I think that's a great way to, he said, scratch his own itch type of thing.
It's amazing. And I think it's one of those where, I don't know, besides the really interesting critical minerals conversation we had, and, him pivoting from being in a really complete different area of life into green energy, I think being able to look at, if you're curious about something, just go. And I think that was the advice he gave towards the end. He's like, if you're curious, if you have a question, just check, just read, go, do it. And honestly, I think it's impressive, because we talk about innovation a lot, and it always feels like there's a barrier to access to do any innovation.
Right. There's gatekeepers all over.
Exactly. No, if you're curious, just go. Check it out.
Yeah. He just knocks those barriers right down, those gatekeepers have no time he's just whizzing right by them.
It's awesome.
So, that was great. And finally, last but not least, episode number 12, Bree Carriglio, Executive Director of the Fund for Armenian Relief. This was a really
touching.
Yes, it was so personal.
Yeah.
I think you and I, for Bree. So for you, what'd you get from this episode?
Oh gosh, I felt like I don't know, it was like talking to an older sister almost. It was like all this knowledge. And I don't know, she has such a loving way of speaking, such a raw way of speaking. And I think it just, again, it ties back to what Lisa was talking about when it comes to empowering leaders. Bree is such an amazing leader because she's so in touch with that emotional side and the things that it brings up. And I think, you know, her passion is her work. And I think that just makes her an amazing leader at it. And I don't know, so honored to have had her on the podcast. It was a great episode. And it really spans into how you can turn, again, like Eric does, you can turn a curiosity and a passion into a whole thing, you know?
She is the embodiment of heart leadership. That's really the top takeaway. Her ability in that episode, which was her first ever podcast. I was so grateful that she trusted us enough to take her on that journey and to be a part of that journey. The fact that she was so like vulnerable and willing to share about the love and respect she had for her mother and her siblings being involved in the journey and her own Armenian heritage. Again, all of the things, the technical things that she said, where there were a lot of, and there were very specific things that are happening with FAR and the work that she's doing, and the women especially that they're empowering. But it was so clearly a personal endeavor for her that the work that was happening at the end was the icing on the cake for her, that she had already found this purpose and this meaning, and the fact that she's able to do that work and that it's having an impact, well, that's just amazing on top of everything else. And then we got to talk about women starting businesses and being empowered to do so and having the infrastructure and the support and the tools and the training and the skills to be able to do that, talking about utilizing social media to be able to sell textiles or to start your own business. That's like real work. That's changing people's lives.
And I think, again, it's a sustainable way of doing it. You know, similar to what Dr. Tom Murphy was saying, you don't just do this overnight. But again, like Dr. Wren said, we need the tools to change things around. And I think that's the beauty about a lot of the conversations we've been having. Our guests are referencing each other without knowing, and topics keep up and we keep finding this thread, and it's I don't know, it feels very whole.
Yeah, it's illuminating a bigger picture. It's like we're getting to zoom out, you and I and our audience and Tangelic Talks through this podcast, and see how so many people's stories and work are interconnected in this way that when you're kind of stuck in your day-to-day and the grind and all that, you don't get an opportunity to see. And at the same time, we're able to zoom way in and get these nuanced, microscopic details of what it takes step by step to be able to accomplish some of these things. It's a really great seat that we're in. I'm really grateful that we get to sit in this seat and be able to have these conversations and be able to, for ourselves, selfishly, even personally, be able to now evolve as humans on this planet trying to survive and thrive.
People would say we're set at the intersection.
We are indeed a podcast and two podcast hosts at the intersection of energy, equity, empowerment. That was a great segue into wrapping up this episode, which was very personal for Victoria and I. We're grateful for the opportunity that our guests have given us, that Tangelic, that Justin and Amber and Tofik and Nosy, Queen, Matthew, Grace, many more that I'm forgetting on our team that have allowed us the opportunity to be able to spearhead these conversations and be able to learn and evolve and hopefully have an impact on you in your day and the work that you do. So again, if anybody out there has a story to tell in this space, has somebody that they look up to, that they work with, that they want to hear represented in Tangelic Talks, please email us at podcast@tangeliclife.org. Go to tangeliclife.org and check out the blog posts, these episodes and all future episodes. Follow us on social media, Tangelic Life. Go to our Instagram. Go check out our Facebook. We'd love to have you be a part of this journey. And we appreciate the opportunity for checking back in with you in our next 12 episodes.
Yeah, thank you guys for an amazing season 1.
All right, that's it. That's what we got for you. Cheers.
Bye.
talk change, from rural lights to brighter days. Equity rising, voices strong. We're building tomorrow where we all belong. Tangelic Talks, energy, equity, pride, empowering the world side by side. A spark becomes a fire, a vision that's true. Together we rise, it starts with you.